Hey guys, it's Liv here. In today's video, we're going to be ranking every electric type Pokemon in competitive VGC. If you enjoy this format and you want to see some more tier lists like it, leave a like and subscribe and answer the comment question of the day. What is your favorite electric type to use in competitive? If I had to pick one this generation, it would probably be either Iron Hands or Sandy Shocks. They're both just so obnoxiously fun to use, and it's always really fun to clean with, though I'm a little bit partial, of course, to the Kilowattrel Raichu core, another really fun core. It seems like a lot of you guys seem to like that on the channel as well. But let me know your guys' thoughts below, and with that said, let's get started. So, as always, we're going to do our inaugural S tier Arceus. S plus is for Pokemon that outright you are objectively losing a space for. This literally will only go to Miraidon, which is objectively the best Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. The only thing that even gives it somewhat competition would quite literally be Koraidon. But as far as Pokemon we have in the format, there are, well, actually, no, that's a lie. There might be one or two that actually can give competition, and I use one or two very loosely when I say that. Like, I'm thinking maybe stuff like Kyogre at its prime could maybe rival these, but it is a small list, and I genuinely mean that. It's like Koraidon, Miraidon, then it's like Kyogre, and then maybe Xerneas makes this list, and then Zacian Crown. Those are like the only 5 that even will ever touch an S+. If you guys are wondering. And then like Arceus normal would maybe touch it, and that's about it. Pretty much any other Arceus would probably be the S tier, which it's really just for the Pokemon that are at least Arceus quality. These are things that you're still fitting well on a team. You don't need to objectively have them on every single team without being fucked, but you should be. These should always be Pokemon that you are like double checking if you do or don't need these, essentially. You don't necessarily need to for the S pluses because they'll just be on your team. The S tiers though, you should at least double check if you need them or not. The A tiers are gonna be for Pokemon that you'll see. You don't need to run these though, but they're at least viable enough, in my opinion, to where these will usually be considered. But they're usually replaceable or by at least something of good quality. B tiers are going to be for more niche stuff. They're not for super niche stuff, though. These are things that you'll probably see a few times in any given laddering session. C tiers you'll probably see like 1 or 2 times in every given laddering session. D tiers are really YouTuber picks, and then the F tiers, those are going to be for Pokemon that are unviable and that even I wouldn't probably use these Pokemon. Starting off with Pikachu. This is a D tier. This is definitely a YouTuber pick. Weirdly enough, Pikachu always finds a way to actually win some sort of event. Light Ball really is just an objectively broken item, and truthfully, this tiering is less so for Pikachu, it's more so for the Light Ball. Light Ball is just fucking broken. Doubling your offenses for both physical and special attack if your name is Pikachu is kind of insane. Like, that's objectively really broken. So, yeah, Pikachu just... enough said, really. This thing has great coverage. This thing has a good enough speed stat too. 90 is a pretty respectable speed tier for a Pokemon with this kind of offense. You could probably throw this in some sort of like Talontusk Tailwind team and use this to clear waters for it, or flying types for it. And unironically, I think Pikachu could have like a very niche place in this metagame, so we'll give it D tier. Raichu gets the C tier, and I'm gonna give Alolan Raichu the C tier as well. Realistically, both of these Pokemon are objectively fine picks. They're both 110 speed, which is good. Alolan Raichu, of course, has the ability to change your, to double your speed in Electric Terrain, which can actually be kind of valuable. If we look at, obviously, how good terrain is, it's not terrible in this format. Though, obviously, with Alolan Raichu, you still get stuff like Fake Out, but neither gets Electro Web this gen, sadly, which is pretty unfortunate, because I think that Alolan Raichu especially could have been a really good abuser of this, and we might have actually seen an uptick on Alolan Raichu usage on Electric Terrain, just as a really good form of speed control, and to take advantage of just being a good partner for some other faster Paradox Pokemon. But it's still not bad. I think these both are objectively just kind of fine enough picks. They're both good enough Fake Out users. They both have a respectable enough speed tier, but they're just fine. Magneton is F tier. This gets the ranking only in general because of the fact that it is intended to be a fully evolved Pokemon. And I guess the one niche you would have is that you're 10 base speed faster than Magnezone. But most teams don't even really need Magnezone right now, so why bother with Magneton, I guess? That's really it. You don't, again, no one really needs to trap a Steel type currently, so why bother running Magneton? I think that's enough said as far as that goes. So this is definitely going to be in the F tier for sure. Moving on though, we do have up next the Let's see. So moving on, we have it looks like electrodes. Ooh, the electrodes, this will be fun. Sorry, I'm fixing my face cam as I'm doing this. But the electrodes. So the electrodes are interesting for sure. We've actually seen electrode now actually top cut an event, so I now need to stop making fun of it. Really sad day, I can't lie. Like, really genuinely sad. I'm gonna be honest though, this is probably gonna get like a D tier anyway. Electrode's interesting enough. Oh, actually, no, I'm gonna bump Electrode up to C. I think my mind has changed on this thing. I don't think it's gonna be some hyper viable Pokemon, but I do think in the past I've a little bit disrespected the fact that this is the fastest Thunder Pokemon. I'm curious about what if they have the team up right now from Knoxville, because I am kind of curious on what that Electrode was running. So. Electrode. This is a team I want to run on the channel at some point next week, assuming that the rental code finally goes up. But Electrode. So it was a Scarf set. This had Thunderbolt, Scary Vase, Terra Blast, and Volt Switch with the Terra Grass. Definitely interesting for sure. Realistically, I'm kind of shocked that it wasn't Thunder Wave, but Scary Phase actually just makes more sense because you'd be able to use this on any Pokemon, whereas with Thunder Wave, it has to be on non-electrics. So this is a decent form of speed control, obviously. You could also use this with like a screen set with Light Clay, as you do get both the light screen and never mind, you don't actually get Reflect. Okay, so then I take that back. You also obviously, I mean, technically speaking, you could go like a normal Gem Explosion set, but really, I think the Scarf set is really the only truly semi-viable set that you have. But it's not terrible. Sui Electrode, I think I'm also gonna give a C tier. Because it does keep the speed tier that Electrode does, and I don't think that the grass typing really adds in a lot more value because they do have the same stats across the board, which I don't really think makes that much of a difference in all honesty, considering the fact that Electrode Hisui's coverage is only a minuscule amount better. Adding on the grass instead of needing it through Terra doesn't really change a lot for this Pokemon in all honesty, albeit you could maybe get an extra stab boost from going for Terra Grass. But this thing's still so frail that I don't think it really matters. I think if anything, truthfully, so I'm going to sort these by order real quick. I think if anything, this is just, like, lower than regular Raichu in the C tier, and this is just the worst in the C tier. But I think it still is definitely a C tier nonetheless. Jolteon. Jolteon's another interesting one. Let's see, so Jolteon also didn't keep Electro Web, right? If Jolteon doesn't it doesn't have Electro Web. I don't even know if this thing got Electro Web, to be completely honest. But this is kind of a shitmon. Albeit I think this is probably like no, this is an F tier. But it's top of F tier for sure, actually. Realistically, that Volt Absorb is decent, but it's not Lightning Rod, which means it doesn't redirect, which means it's kind of shit. The speed tier being a little bit better than Raichu is fine, but when you're not actually pulling in those electric attacks, what's the point really? And then not only that, but it's too frail. It's like Electrode levels of frail. It gets Wish, I guess, but does that really actually matter? Really, the one benefit that you actually have is Helping Hand, but even still, it's not exactly too appreciated on Jolteon because you're never really going to pull it off well, in my opinion. So definitely F tier. Zapdos. I'm unsure if I want to put Zapdos in the A tier or the S tier. I'm inclined to put it in the S tier actually for now. Zapdos' bulk would be really appreciated in the later rounds of this format. The typing as well with electric and flying is going to be immensely valuable. With the 100 speed, you're able to pull off really good manual tailwinds, which will be better than stuff like Corviknight, for example. And you have a good enough offensive stat to where you could probably actually pull off decent builds with like Specs, Life Orb, Weakness Policy, and make this thing work. Truthfully, actually something that could be kind of interesting is pairing this with like an Ice Shard Pokemon, such as something like Sneasel, for example, or you could maybe pair this on Sand with like a Lycanroc, and you can use this as a pretty decent check to grasses with Heat Wave, or with like a Terra Blast Flying, since obviously your Hurricane would not be boosted on Sand. Though objectively speaking, the best sort of team this would run on would be something like a Rain team, where I think Zapdos could have a lot of merit. Overall, definitely a really good pick in this format for sure, and it's definitely getting an S tier in my opinion. Moving on to Ampharos. Ampharos is another kind of interesting one. I feel like this is definitely at least an F tier, but I feel like it's better than Jolteon and also the Magneton. Ampharos, if nothing else, kind of has an okay Trick Room stat of 55. Now, obviously, we have better even electric types of this Trick Room stat, as well as better electric types that are slower than this. But Ampharos' coverage is pretty unique. It gets stuff like electric moves, but you also get stuff like Focus Blast, Power Gem, Dragon Pulse, which, if nothing else, also Dazzling Gleam. So if nothing else, even pre-Terra, you get some good options. And then obviously with Terra Blast, you know, that opens it up a lot. So yeah, I think Everest is kind of okay. Static is a decent ability, but it's kind of common on electric, so I can't really rank it higher based off of static alone. But this is definitely an F tier. Luxray. Luxray is pretty interesting. This actually gets a lot of usage on the JP side, I found. And if for good reason. It's a kind of bulky Intimidate option. It is a not bad Trick Room option as well. You can take advantage of Guts. This thing gets a lot of good well-rounded coverage. We're going to give this thing right above regular Electrode. In fact, actually, I kind of want to give this thing right above Alolan Raichu. Strictly Alolan Raichu. I think these two are still better. But I think that Alolan Raichu, one of the biggest irks is that Pincurchin already is kind of a niche pick, and trying to run a speed control Pokemon off of Pincurchin of all things, I don't really think makes a big difference, because you're not really running Alolan Raichu if you don't have Terrain Up, but with Terrain Up it's really good, whereas something like Luxray doesn't really need any sort of Archetype support. It's just kind of an okay Intimidate on. So we're going to give it the C tier. Pachirisu also gets a C tier. This objectively is probably going to be the best C tier besides Raichu. Voltorb is good on this Pokemon. For what it's worth, it's obviously not Lightning Rod, but something that Pachirisu does have is that it is kind of bulky, and it gets some really good specific support with stuff like Helping Hand. You get stuff like Super Fang, Nozzle, and stuff like Encore as well. You also could use this thing with Light Screen at the very least, though again, no Reflect, just like Electrode. Overall, you got a lot of really specific support on this Pokemon to where this thing is actually a viable pick. You could even go for some stat drop options like Baby Doll Eyes or Charm. Charm would actually be the more viable one there. Or you can go with Eerie Impulse for the special attack side, and also go with stuff like Fake Tears for the special defense. I don't think this thing gets anything to drop BizDef, but that's honestly okay. It gets stats to drop the other three options. So that's pretty good. Like I think this thing definitely can be a really good support pick that you could tailor to whatever you need. So we're gonna give it the C tier. Magnezone, I'm giving Magnezone the D tier, right below Pikachu. This thing is good enough, I guess, as a Steel type. It's too good to put in the F tier truthfully, because this could in theory be okay Trick Room Steel with like Electric, with well probably like a Terra Flying actually, and you'd go with like an Analytic set, and you could get some good damage off with that. I think this is just slow enough to really be a viable-ish Trick Room Pokemon, but at the same time, I don't know. I think that Magnezone is definitely just outclassed in this format as far as special attackers go, as far as electrics go, as far as steals go even, which is kind of hard to do because there's not really a lot of viable steals right now. So we're going to definitely give this thing a D tier. Now it's time for the Rotom rankings. So we have Rotom Heat is going to get the A tier. Rotom Wash is going to be above it in the A tier. We're going to have Rotom Frost, which will get the C tier. It's going to go above Electrode and Raichu. We're going to put Rotom in the F tier below Ampharos. Rotom Fan is going to get the D tier below Magnezone, and Rotom Mow gets a B tier. Now for an explanation of all the ratings, I'll start with Rotom Wash. Rotom Wash is one of the best Rotom typings in general, and with Terra Fire, you're able to get past one of your very few checks, being stuff like Amoonguss and Brute Bonnet. There's not really a lot of checks that actually exist to Water and Electric. It's a pretty good typing, and when you add Terra Fire onto that, it's honestly a really good Nasty Plot Pokemon. You still get good support with stuff like Will-O-Wisp and Volt Switch, so you could, in theory, just pivot out into other breakers, or you could even just burn stuff, which is pretty valuable. Rotom Wash is definitely A. Rotom Heat is essentially just Rotom Wash, where you can go for Terra Water, but you could also still go for Terra Electric or Fire. The one benefit this thing does have is that you could throw on the safety goggles, and you'll naturally break Amoonguss without Terra, which is pretty good. However, you still have a lot of other Pokemon that do wall use, stuff like Gastrodon, for example, so Terra Grass is probably a good bet here. Overall, they're definitely an A tier. Rotom Mow is pretty good. The Electric Grass is fairly unique, and there's not really Pokemon that do touch that with their natural stabs, outside of like Hisui Electrode. Rotom also does get some support with Will-O-Wisp as well as Thunderwave, so the more status options are appreciated here. It's a good Nasty Plot abuser, its bulk is a little bit better than Electrode's, but at the same time though, it's such an awkward Pokemon, it really only fits on hyper-specific builds. Like I would really only run this on Rain, for example, and even still there's usually better options on Rain, but it's a justifiable enough Pokemon. For Frost gets carried by Terra. It's essentially just like a worse version of Rotom Wash, where you could run this with like a Terra Water to get the better defensive typing. But at the same time though, like Electric Ice, it's really only good for Bolt Beam, and even still, you're pretty much not really taking advantage of Blizzard hitting 100% without Hail, which means if you're running it on Hail, you're benefiting more from not going for Terra, and the typing's kind of shit if you don't go for Terra, so C tier. Fan is just a worse version of Rotom Frost, where it gets the natural stab to cover the Amoonguss, but at the same time though, Electric Flying does not take advantage of Levitate. You kind of need to tear this into water. And then Rotom Base, the stats without the bulk is just not appreciated, so F tier. Next up we have Electros. Electros is interesting. This is also kind of a pseudo-viable pick. We're going to put this thing below Electrode though. I think Electrode having better track record than Eel is important to note. But this has a good enough Trick Room stat at 50. 50 speed is actually pretty good. This is something like an Iron Hands and Kingambit speed tier. And you get some good coverage just like Drain Punch, Fire Punch, U-Turn, Volt Switch. You get stuff like Giga Drain, Grass Knot. Like you can make a lot of stuff work. Sadly, this doesn't keep knockoff. I think if it did, we would actually be seeing some Eel usage, and I could actually probably justify putting this in the middle of C tier. But it's still a fine enough pick to where we're going to still give it C tier. Thundy. Thundy gets an S+. Thundy I gets an S+. Thundy T gets an A tier, and we'll actually put it at the top of A tier. We'll start with Thundy T, because it's a little bit easier to go over. Really strong breaker. Volt Absorb is still a fine ability, but again, it's not Lightning Rod. But this, in Thundy's case, I think it might actually be a little more appreciated, because despite the fact that you don't redirect, getting health back on a Pokemon that already naturally breaks so easily is pretty appreciated. Realistically, this will benefit a lot from Dual Dance sets with stuff like Agility, Plot, and then Terra Blast plus coverage, and you can make a lot work with this. Definitely an objective A tier in my opinion. Thundy I. Thundy I is pretty unrivaled as far as support Pokemon go, but it's also still objectively a really good offensive piece. 111 is nothing to sneeze at. This is an amazing prankster user with stuff like Eerie Impulse. You get stuff like, for example, I think this thing gets fake tiers? No, Thundy doesn't get fake tiers. Let's look at the status it gets. So obviously you have Thunder Wave, you have Scary Face, you have Taunt, you have Nasty Plot for your own setup sets, you go for Eerie Impulse. This is the only prankster Pokemon with Electric Train, which is very important for Paradoxes. You could use these on Paradox Pokemon, and I think we might actually see the prankster train going off, because this is a lot better of a train user than Pincurchin would be, despite Pincurchin having it through ability. You also get some stuff like Rain Dance, Sunny Day for Weathers. You could genuinely make a lot work in this. Even Swagger with Mirror Herb sets could also be decent. Objective S+ in my opinion. Thundy is one of the only non-Ubers I think that truly will touch this tier. Because it's so obnoxiously broken. This is the equivalent of throwing in like a Whimsicott or an Incineroar into the format, and there are very, very few non-Ubers that really touch this. To put in perspective, for anyone who doubts this, and I know I'm going to get comments about, oh, why is Thundy I above Zapdos and Arceus? Thank you for skipping to the end of the video, I appreciate it. But Thundy I is one of the only non-Ubers in Sword and Shield that was even touching stuff like Kyogre, Yveltal, Groudon. Like these are not bad Pokemon. These are some of the best Pokemon that format had to offer, and Thundy was getting more usage than a lot of these. It was on more teams than a lot of these. It was more consistent in battling people than a lot of these. So I think it would be a crime to not put Thundy in the S+, and I think even despite the fact that this is a really obnoxious Dynamax abuser, that was one of the best reasons in its favor. The support this thing offers truly is unrivaled, and it still is always good in all of these restricted formats. We can go back to 2016, we can go back to all of the Gen 5 formats, we can go back to 2019. This has always been an obnoxious support piece. 2019 was the worst format it had, and even still it was amazing. So S+ objectively. Dedenne, fucking terrible. Worst Pokemon on the list today, because at least Magneton has a niche. This does not. Oricorio actually gets a top of D tier. Oricorio is kind of weird. This thing is a decent enough dancer Pokemon, and getting Quiver Dance is actually kind of cool for it. It's essentially just a shitty Zapdos, but Zapdos is a lot bulkier. You get just better offensive options than Zapdos. The fact this thing doesn't really get a coverage for grasses outside of Hurricane is a little unfortunate, because that means that you are kind of rain locked, and at least Zapdos can run Heat Wave, and also this thing doesn't really get a good spread. The only electric type attack you get is Revelation Dance, and I guess technically Terra Blast, but why would you run Terra Blast in this? Because it's just weaker Revelation Dance. But that's kind of shit, because this thing could have benefited a lot from something like a Discharge. So definitely a D tier. If this thing had Discharge, I genuinely think it would be like a high C tier. That really is the thing that's holding it back, in my opinion, compared to other electrics, is the lack of a spread move. Toxtricity. Toxtricity gets a B tier. Oh, actually, no, it gets a C tier. We'll put it top of C. I think it's a little bit too slow to be a B tier, truthfully. If this thing had 80 speed, I think it would be a B tier, or maybe even A, to be honest. But Tox is a really good not-electric type by running Terra normal sets. Really good on this Pokemon, to be honest. This is an amazing Pokemon in Tailwind teams. You're essentially always running this with Terra normal, though. If you can't Terra this, you're never bringing it to a game, though, which is kind of unfortunate. But this is a good breaker overall. Throat Spray is an amazing set on this. It's a fairly unique item that really only Sylveon would get competition for. So it's definitely a good Pokemon to just throw on a Tailwind team that won't exactly take up item coverage, which is good. Overall, definitely C tier. Pincurchin gets a B tier. I think Electric Terrain has shown, even past my Series 2 tier list, that this is actually a fairly good playstyle in the format. We're seeing this on Trick Room teams with stuff like Iron Hands, and it's doing pretty well. Albeit Pincurchin is still a fairly niche pick. I still think that Thundy will objectively be a better prankster, a better Electric Terrain user than Pincurchin will be. But this is decent enough. It has a good niche in Underpace and Torkoal, which, especially seeing Torkoal's usage rising later on in the format, I think that having a Pokemon that underpaces it on Trick Room teams is really good, and it pairs really well with stuff like Iron Hands. It's an amazing Trick Room core. So overall, definitely B tier. Regieleki gets the top of S tier. This could rise to the S plus tier. Well, actually, let me see. There is one thing that right now will decide if Regieleki gets the S plus or not. And it is, did this thing keep Electro Web? It did keep Electro Web. Okay, so actually Regieleki can get the S plus. It's one of the few electrics that kept this. If we look through Pokemon that keep Electro Web, it is Magnezone, Ampharos, Magneton, and an Alecki, and that's it. So Regieleki being the only actual viable Pokemon on that list, already a huge starting point. This is the fastest Pokemon in the format. This thing is one of the best speed control users in the game. It's arguably better than a lot of the prankster Pokemon besides like Thundy and Grimmsnarl. Just off of merit, the fact that this thing has a speed tier and it doesn't need to care about the fact that people might be dark types and be immune to prankster. You get some really good coverage, coverage through Terra Blast now. So the fact that you're hard-walled by electric type, by ground types and Pokemon with electric immunities, such as Volt Absorb and Lightning Rod, no longer affects you because you could run a Terra type to get around these. In fact, even last format, this was still one of the best Pokemon with stuff like Dynamax. And I think that Terra will just be even more broken for this thing. This thing was objectively too broken for a Terra format, in my opinion. However, I do think that Thundurus will be slightly better speed control in this format, as I think that there will be Pokemon that can more consistently break in this format outside of Dynamax. We're seeing a lot of, we'll be seeing a lot of good ground types to where Alecki essentially needs to Terra or it's a bust. But the thing is, though, is that Alecki going for Terra actually does hurt it a little bit, as you're now susceptible to stuff like Prankster T-Wave. So it is kind of a mixed bag. Essentially, you need to either commit to losing to the ground type or losing to Thunder Wave control, which actually is a little bit of downside. I'm actually going to put Alecki in the S tier. That might be a bit of a hot take. I don't think it's good enough for the S plus, actually. And I think it's specifically because of what it loses by going for Terra. So I'm kind of curious. I think this is borderline S plus, but I do think that talking it out, I'm a little more confident giving this thing the S tier. If this thing wasn't so bad to coverage wise to where you had to Terra to do anything, we could actually see this thing being a really good S plus. But again, being now susceptible to Thunder Wave is really bad for this Pokemon. So we're gonna give this thing the S tier. Bellybolt gets a C tier. We're gonna put this thing right above, we'll put it right above Rotom Frost. I think this is a decent Trick Room pick still. We actually have seen Bellybolt top cut at Bochum regionals, actually. In fact, this had a high performance at Bochum. If we look through the Bochum stats, this thing ranked 19th overall, and it ranked on a Trick Room team too at that. So yeah, no, Bellybolt still got it in my opinion. The ability is really insane. The person at Bochum Regional specifically ran this with Assault Vest, with Sucker Punch, Thunderbolt, Parabolic Charge, and Muddy Water, which Parabolic Charge is so good. This thing on what Weakness Policy teams is so obnoxious to KO with the Parabolic. This is essentially just a self-sustain perpetual health machine, because you get spread on everything, and you can just keep this thing healthy and healthy and healthy. And especially with Weakness Policy, it's also doing really good damage. Objective C tier in my opinion. Palma gets a high B tier. This is going to be the top of B, actually. This has been rising up in the rankings. I think people have started to catch on that Revival Blessing is really good in VGC still, and the opportunity cost is still worth it, because you could throw on some other good support too with stuff like Fake Out, and make this thing into a decent support pick. The Double Shock set as well is really deadly. A lot of teams still don't really have ground types, which for better or worse kind of makes sense. When Lando comes back in the format, this will probably drop severely in viability, but it's still going to be good at least for the support set. But no one's really going to run double shock when half the teams are running Lander Asterion. Still really good though, but again, it's really just taking advantage of right now the fact that there are not viable ground types, because it's stuff like Garchomp, Great Tusk, and Sandy Shocks, and that's really it. Those are the only viable ground types unless you're going for Terra. There's nothing else that's actually usable in this format right now. So the fact that Palmot can take advantage of such a good niche, such a glaring hole in the format, is really valuable. So we'll give Palmot B tier. Kilowattrel gets the B tier as well, but I'm going to put it right below Palmot. Really good Tailwind user, competitive is a great ability overall in this thing as well. Overall, Kilowattrel really just benefits the most from having the manual Tailwind plus high speed, and the fact that it still has some good coverage with stuff like flying and electric. It's essentially just a worse Zapdos, but it's fast enough to where you could actually, in theory, justify this in certain comps. And competitive is a really good offensive ability to where we'll get the same B tier. Sandy Shocks gets an A tier. We're putting this right above Rotom Heat. This is a decent Terra user actually, and the 101 speed with booster energy is amazing. This has been deadly on cores such as Espathra Sandy Shocks with Hypnosis and Gravity. Overall, really good top cut Pokemon. It's a lot better than I thought it would be, and I think that one of the things I overlooked with this is the fact this has the ground typing, and with Terra you can get around that grass type weakness. So definitely a really good pick. Honestly, really good A tier. Iron Hands, definitely S+. It's only S+ because it's Terra, but for what it's worth, this is a really good pick. I do think that both Miraidon and Thundurus Eye will outclass this thing, but this is still a really good electric type. I think I overlooked this again when I did my Series 2 tier list as far as Pokemon go. But this is really objectively just a strong Pokemon. One of the best Pokemon even still. This is an amazing Terra user. It's a great Shroom pick. It's great Fake Out support. It's great Silva Sponge. You could tailor this thing to whatever you want. It is essentially, until we get Incineroar back, it is our Incineroar. It still gives pretty obnoxiously high usage. I think it's sitting at around like 50 something in the format currently. We can actually pull this up. So Iron Hands right now currently, as of stuff like Bochum Regionals and Knoxville Regionals, has about 35% usage. If we compare this to the Series 12 Stadium stats, this is pretty proportional to Pokemon like Thundurus Eye, Kyogre, Grimmsnarl, Gastrodon, which, keep in mind, these were all considered some of the best Pokemon at that time in the format. These are the 3rd through 6th best Pokemon that touched within a percentage or two of Iron Hands usage. The only two things that hit higher than this are Zacian Crown at 69% and Incineroar at about 74%. Which is kind of insane to think about, that there are only 2 Pokemon that hit around like higher percent usage than around where Iron Hands was. And even still, this is fairly close in most of these regionals compared to stuff like Iron Bundle, for example. Iron Bundle hits, in fact, at Bochum, they're both at 42.76%. At Oceania, Bundle is only 8% higher, and that is the 2nd highest. At Knoxville, it's about 7% higher, and at Orlando, this is just the most used. So I still think that Iron Hands is definitely objectively a really good pick, objective S+. Finally, Iron Thorns. This is definitely a niche pick. We're putting it at the bottom of B tier. I think this has comps that it works on, stuff like Trick Room Teams, for example. It's a really good banded Pokemon, actually. This could be, in theory, decent on Tailwind, too, because the speed tier is just acceptable enough at 71 to where you could run this thing with like a bandit set on Tailwind and at least be kind of okay. But it's still a little bit too slow for my personal taste, as you can't even outpace Booster Bundle, which is kind of unfortunate. Booster Bundle is like the metric of a really good Tailwind pick for me outside of Great Tusk. It's truly the exception to the rule, and then Goldengo, which is the only other acceptable pick there. But Iron Thorns is still not terrible. It's still a niche enough option on Tailwind. It's still a niche enough option on Trick Room. The typing is okay, and with stuff like Terra Bug, you could, in theory, actually get some pretty good defensive use out of this, while still handling stuff like Grass types who would otherwise sponge you. So I'm going to give this thing the B tier. But that is going to be our tier list for today. If you enjoyed the electric type tier list and you want to see some more like it, leave a like on the video and subscribe for more. Shoutouts to channel members today, of course, being Josh K, Ultra Player, Mia, Zeke Zero, Matt O'Shea, Bbat. Your guys' support on the channel is greatly appreciated, and if you want to see some more content, such as our bonus ladder rankings, make sure to hit the channel membership button for only a couple dollars a month. We're getting one next Saturday, and we'll hope to see you guys then. I'm going to be changing from mono electric because I forgot the ladder resets, so I already have a new type planned. You'll see it next week. Until then, peace out, guys.